Hello everyone, today we will be discussing the Yakuza minority group. Now let's explore a little bit about the cultural characteristics of the Yakuza. In terms of language, it is important to understand that Yakuza members were considered and still are considered outsiders in the Japanese society. They use a specialized form of language with unique terms that reflect their culture and work, and these Yakuza Japanese includes formal honorifics, insults, and varies by region. In terms of symbols, the dragon symbolizes wisdom, strength, protection, and power. Dragons are often associated with water and represent a generous, big hearted force that uses its power for good. There is also the cherry blossom, or the sakura, which are delicate flowers that represent the beauty and fragility of life. The brief but brilliant bloom serves as a reminder of the fleeting nature of human existence and the inevitability of death. And finally, the koi carp. It represents perseverance, strength of spirit, and the ability to overcome obstacles. The symbolism comes from a legend where the koi swims upstream to become a dragon, representing the achievement of high goals despite the difficulties. When it comes to clothing, members are often portrayed as males with heavily tattooed bodies and wearing a fundoshi, sometimes with a kimono, or in more recent years, a Western style sharp suit covering them.
To understand why the Yakuza exist from a structural functionalistic perspective of deviance, we must first look at Robin Merton's strain theory. His theory is that deviance, a component that makes society function, arises from tension and conflict between cultural goals and the institutionalized means of achieving said goals. This includes conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, and rebellion. In terms of the Yakuza's own place in the structural functionalistic view, they fall under his innovator category. This is due to their maintenance of cultural goals, such as stability and social order for their country's development, especially in the political reform of Japan. However, they do not strive for or achieve these goals by what we would consider institutionalized means. This group is involved in many criminal activities that completely reject such methods. They dabble in gambling, sex work, legal trades, and many other activities that disregard the law, such as underground governing, by siding with particular officials of power in exchange for free roam of operations. They also aim at reshaping the social boundaries accepted by the general public, imposing their own norms via the spaces and gaps left by the current institutions as a way for them to maintain their own power, but as a side effect, also keeping society functional, hence accepting the goals but following through with illegitimate means, making them innovators.
So now we'll explore how the Yakuza interact with Japan's macro economy. So the Yakuza go way back to the 17th till 19th century, and back then they were mostly street merchants, gamblers, and protectors of the poor, so they offered protection and loans and a sense of community for those who were marginalized, and over time these groups grew. After World War II, Japan was in extreme poverty, so the Yakuza ran the black market, providing goods and services that the government and banks couldn't. Then there was the economic miracle, and during this time, Japan industrialized and the Yakuza shifted towards legitimate businesses, and they were operating front companies and entering real estate and banking through different practices like jiageya, which is persuading small property owners to sell for larger developments. During Japan's bubble economy from the mid-1980s to 1991, real estate and stock market prices were very inflated, and here the Yakuza were heavily involved in money laundering and financial schemes, and they also did something called sokaya. This is when Yakuza buy little company stock to attend meetings, and then they threaten the company for money. And then, once this bubble popped in 1991, the economy was stagnating. So at this point, the Yakuza adapted again and offered small loans and informal financial services. And what they're currently doing is they're taking advantage of the aging population, and they're targeting them in scams to get more money. And this is called tokushu sagi. So, the Yakuza also provided work and income during times of high unemployment. As you can see in the graph, unemployment was very higher before the economic miracle, and during the economic miracle it was around 1%, and then it grew. And they offered work for groups that were marginalized, especially for groups like Burakumi, a group that Japanese society socially discriminates against, and this has been going on for centuries, and ethnic Koreans and poor youth, and these were all often excluded from formal employment. So many poor households and small homeowners, or as I said before, marginalized groups, couldn't get loans from banks, and here the Yakuza stepped in, offering fast cash, high interest loans, and financial support when the state could.
The founding figures of the Yakuza were ultranationalists who perpetrated the imperialism that led to war in the Pacifics in the 1940s, and its early bosses were military leaders and imprisoned political figures. Yakuza is not illegal, making it less risky for individuals to join, strengthening its presence. While Yakuza-owned businesses are marked and police know about the whereabouts of the members and the activities done by them, there is very little conflict between the police and the criminal organization. Yakuza members were actually called to help in 1960 when Eisenhower was supposed to come visit. The meeting was cancelled, but the implication of the Yakuza's force being called to help out National Guards was still grand. Since the US occupation, Yakuza has been involved with multiple government leaders in order to rebuild Japan, reaching as far on the political ladder as the Prime Minister. The government only started to implement stricter laws on criminal groups in the 21st century. The Japanese constitution has multiple ultranationalist elements, such as the symbol of the emperor, that might reinforce people's desire to act in an ultranationalist way, making Yakuza an appealing option. The constitution actually states that Japan forever renounces war as a sovereign right of the nation. This, combined with the historical facts that the government has turned to Yakuza before for armed aid and that the police bats an eye to most of its criminal actions, is another reinforcing factor of Yakuza's presence. In Japan, local entities have large autonomy relating to labor, education, social welfare, health, land preservation and development, and disaster prevention. The dividends of power might make it more frequent that local authorities need help from external organizations and make it a lot more likely that they can be bribed. Yakuza has actually shifted its focus to white-collar crimes in the last few decades. Due to imbalanced voting districts in which some votes are worth 5 times as much as others, Yakuza-influenced power figures might be a lot more common than expected.
In terms of their ideology, there were 4 main parts, starting with hierarchy. They had a lot of metaphorical parent-child relationships that were huge components of the strict, multi-layered hierarchy of the Yakuza. They had ultimate allegiance and loyalty to the group, but especially to higher officers and, of course, the highest parent, the leader. The second part would be traditional Japanese values of honor, and later on their code, which was dictated to their way of life, referenced great duty and the sense of justice towards the country, which is what they were fighting for mostly as a unit. Next was their chivalry. They saw themselves as symbols of chivalry meant to protect the weak and enforce the laws and ways of the underworld and criminal scene of Japan. They had a high influence coming from samurai folklore and stories. Finally, their criminal activities. Ultimately, over time, they became much more focused on white-collar crime, which made their schemes even grander and made them even more reputable.